Hello, fantastic fourth graders. Welcome to another wonderful day of learning. So, to this point, we've learned how to collect, how to organize, how to represent, and how to interpret data in both line graphs and bar graphs. Today, we will continue. However, we will discuss how to compare different representations of the same data, meaning we have the same information, we have the same data, the same question was asked, it's represented differently. And so we want to talk about which representation makes the most sense, which representation is the best to be able to answer questions about or in a bar graph or a line graph. So when you're ready, grab your paper and pencil and join me. Okay. Do you have your pencil and paper ready? Let's begin with a warm-up. Which number should replace the question mark in the table so that it will represent the data on the bar graph? A, 45, B, 60, C, 50, or D, 25? Which number should replace the question mark in the table so that it will represent the data on the bar graph? Think about it for a moment. What do you think? If you said A, you are absolutely correct. The number that should represent mac and cheese is 45. How do you know that? Well, let's take a look at the bar graph. Wait a minute. What do you notice about this bar graph? What do you say? I can't hear you. Oh, yeah, that is different. It is now horizontal. In the past or in the previous lessons, we viewed bar graphs that were vertical. We probably even made a few vertical bar graphs, but this time the bars are horizontal. That still doesn't change the information. So with that, how did you know it was 45? Oh, because just like we discovered on the ruler and the number line, that each space has a name, it represents something. That's the same case here. As you see, mac and cheese sits on this line here. It's not 40, it's not 50, it's somewhere in between 40 and 50. Just so happens this is an easy case because it lies right in the middle of 40 and 50. So therefore, the answer is 45. Now I have a bonus question for you. What is one observation that can be made by reading the graph? Take a look at your graph. What is one observation that can be made by reading the graph? I'll give you some think time. I say, my observation is, I can tell or I can see spaghetti is the most popular school lunch choice. I also see that chicken nuggets is not too far behind. That's the second favorite. I can also see that cheese pizza is the least favorite because only 15 students wanted it or ate it or chose it as its favorite. Now, as you're making observations, look at the way the data is represented in both examples. You have a table and you have a bar graph. Which one makes the data easier to read or to interpret? If you had a choice, which would you prefer? That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So our I can statement is, I can compare two different representations of the same data. So again, think back to our warm-up. We had two representations of the same data. We had a chart or table, and we had a bar graph. Same information, so the same story, asked the same question, it's just that it was represented differently. And so that's our goal today, to take a look at ways that data, the same data, can be represented. And we just have to take some time to pick through it to see which one works best, which one is going to help us tell the complete story or to answer some of these challenging questions? What do you think? And which representation is it easiest to determine when the greatest rise in temperature occurred? So we have to take a look at both representations of the data. And this data is about temperature over time. You have a table and you have a line graph. So in which representation is it easiest to determine when the greatest rise in temperature occurred? By looking at the table or by looking at the graph? I'd say by looking at the graph. It's just easiest to see when the temperature rose, or in this case, the greatest rise. That's what we're looking for. So I would say the line graph. See, in the table, I have to take a look at it, put it in order, and think about it. That's a lot. It tells the same story. It's just represented differently. And sometimes it's easier to see it a different way. So how about question number 2? In which representation do you readily see the increase or decrease of temperature over time? Yeah, the same case. I'd say a line graph because again, I can see where it increased and if it were to decrease, and in this case, it's steadily increasing. Again, with the table, same information because the information was just organized here but represented here. It's just easy to see it in your line graph, okay? So now you give it a try. I'm going to show you 2 different representations, and then you'll have to answer questions. Use what you see, what you have observed or will observe in each representation to answer the question. Are you ready? Let's get started. All righty. Laura liked peanut butter and jelly. Kenny liked plain jelly. Oliver also liked plain jelly. Kate and David liked plain peanut butter. Oh, I forgot to mention that Steve, Isabel, and Sam also prefer peanut butter and jelly. Kristen liked peanut butter and fluff. Mariko liked plain fluff, while Sally and Ty liked jelly and fluff. So this is representation 1, okay? And now, read the 4 questions to yourself as I read them aloud. What kind of sandwich was preferred by most people? Who likes jelly and fluff? Sandwich is the best. What kinds of sandwiches were preferred by only 2 people? What kind of sandwich did Oliver prefer? What do you think? Okay, let's check out the second example. Sandwich data 2, the lunch bunch favorite chart. So now we have sandwich types, voting students. So it's carefully organized, the data is carefully organized in a table or chart and then represented using a bar graph. We see peanut butter and jelly. We see the sandwich types on your horizontal axis and the number of votes on your vertical axis. So now let's look at the same 4 questions again. Which kind of sandwich was preferred by the most people? Who likes jelly and fluff sandwiches the best? What kinds of sandwiches were preferred by only 2 people? And what kind of sandwich did Oliver prefer? Let's talk about it. You know I love turn and talk. So find a friend so you can discuss your answers with your friend. Number 1, why were you able to answer the questions more quickly with the sandwich data 2, the second representation with the chart and the bar graph? Remember, the first representation was the paragraph. So why were you able to answer the questions more quickly with the sandwich data 2? Turn and talk. Question number 2. Think about the 4 questions. Here are the 4 questions, just in case you had forgotten what they were. Decide whether it matters if the information is in paragraph form or in a bar graph, and why? So take some time, turn and talk, and when you're ready, press play so that you can see my sample discussion. Okay, if I had to turn and talk, here's what I would say, or some of the things I would say. Data in the bar graph is quicker to read and easier to understand than the data in paragraph form. So I preferred the second representation, the one with the chart and the bar graph. It was just easier to read and understand. The paragraph form had too many words for me. The bar graph groups and categorizes the important information simply and clearly. The chart was more valuable for questions about particular people, but the bar graph was more helpful when the question was about how many. How many people like peanut butter and jelly, how many people like fluff, and so on. Bar graphs show the categories and the number of votes. All the information I need, plain and simple. Bar graphs are a way to summarize the data displayed in a chart or a paragraph. So, different representation, same data. The paragraph had all of the information, but the chart and the bar graph just displayed it easier so we can read it and answer questions. It's easier to interpret. So guess what? It's your turn now. Independent practice time. You're going to need your paper and your pencil for this. Which shows the best representation of the data in the chart and why? So here's a chart. Fruit sales. I'm going to show you two different representations of the same data. Your task will be to just write down which one shows the best representation of the data in the chart, in this chart, and tell me why. Here are the two representations. You have a bar graph here and the paragraph. Here's the paragraph. The farmer's market had a fruit sale last weekend. More than 100 people attended the sale. It was a nice crowd, and pears were the least favorite fruit. The market sold apples, bananas, grapes, oranges, and pears. 20 apples were sold on Friday and 20 sold on Saturday. The pears were not selling as much, with 15 sold on Friday, 5 on Saturday, and the remaining on Sunday. The market only sold 5 more bags of grapes than pears. The bananas sold the most, with over half being sold on Saturday and the remaining on Sunday. So once again, your task is to tell which shows the best representation of the data in the chart and why. And that, boys and girls, brings us to the end of day 4 of learning all about graphs, collecting, organizing, representing, interpreting, and now comparing. So have fun. Feel free to discuss this with your family members or that friend you turn and talk with, and write your answers down. And I'll see you tomorrow for our performance task day.